In this series, we cover many products, promos, and pack-ins available to support Dungeon Masters and players within the world of Eberron. And this is the first of many videos covering miniatures created for Eberron, characters, and monsters over many iterations of the game by Wizards of the Coast and licensees like WizKids and Gale Force 9. At the time of recording this video, WizKids still has more miniatures coming out of their unpainted line of Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures, but the bulk of the minis are from the older Wizards of the Coast published Dungeons & Dragons miniatures game, or the current WizKids Icons in the Realms product, which comes pre-painted. All examples of the figures, wherever possible, will be my own miniatures. They're not brand new or in mint condition, so expect a couple dings and scratches on the paint job. I'm going to focus in on one topic or type of mini, like a specific species, class, or type of monster. This time I'm focusing on the dead, so including the undead, undying, and those they associate with regularly, like the Blood of Vol, and, well, if there were any miniatures for them, the Elves of Erenal. Let's start with the forces of Karrnath. Karrnathi Undead comes in two main forms in most editions, Karrnathi Zombies and Karrnathi Skeletons. Those creatures are in all three editions that Eberron exists within, though in the 5th edition books there's only one stat block to use for Karrnathi Undead. Looking at the skeletons, of which there are two variations, is a good place to begin. The nation of Karrnath has two big defining traits. First, it's a nation led by warlords, and the best troops and commanders are trained in the Reckonmark Academy, Eberron's equivalent to West Point. The other defining feature is a significant part of the population follows a non-standard religion, and are not vassals of the sovereign host or followers of the Silver Flame. Instead, they follow the ways of the Blood of Vol. This religion is fairly deep, and I'll talk about it a bit more later in the video. But the short end of it means that undead are treated as martyrs, if intelligent, and dead bodies are empty shells, so can continue to serve their communities past their death, and give that seeker some sort of semblance of life after death. This skeleton was made by WizKids, and is directly based on the original 3.5 edition art by Andrew Jones from the Eberron campaign setting book, so the design matches the art very closely, including the spiky swords. This skeleton came out in the 5th edition era, so is in the Icons of the Realms set, Eberron Rising from the Last War, which came out April 2020. It is a common from the set, denoted by the low collector's number. In the 3.5 Eberron campaign setting, Karrnathi Skeletons are a CR3 creature, and it was a level 11 skirmisher in the 4th edition Eberron campaign guide. When Karrnath entered into the Last War, its military might granted it a great advantage. However, soon into the war, there was a huge famine, and the Karns were losing people both on the battlefield and back at home in huge numbers. King Caius I decided to openly embrace the Blood of Vol, and invited their priests to assist with the war effort, creating the first of the Karrnathi Undead. While it is also based on the same art by Andrew Jones as the previous mini, this uncommon variant from the Icons of the Realms set, Eberron Rising from the Last War, has an alternate weapon to the common version. The axes are completely original, though the rest of the sculpt is exactly the same as the common. Both skeletons have a lot of variation in arm placement, as the plastic allows for a fair amount of give. If you get a number of these minis, you can use heating and cooling techniques to fix any extreme bends, or even make a whole warband more uniform. I prefer to have a little bit of variation myself. The other Karrnathi Undead were mentioned. Malevenor and the priests of the Crimson Monastery in Atur, and forces based in Fort Zombie and Bones, helped Karrnath also create zombies with their special rituals. These zombies, alongside their bony counterparts, are intelligent, and retain their skills from life, but not their memories. So the best of the undead were great warriors in life too, with many people actually volunteering their bodies to the necromancy willingly in the case they died of hunger or in battle. This zombie was made by Wizards of the Coast as part of the War Drums set, released March 2006. It's based on the Karrnathi Zombie art from the campaign setting book by Andrew Jones, with the miniature concept art by Thomas N. Baxa. Though the headpiece is smaller than in the original art, and some liberties were taken with the coloration. And based on what you can see from this promotional photography from Wizards of the Coast, some paint steps were dropped between the masters and the final issuance of the miniature. It was an uncommon in War Drums, which is denoted with the diamond symbol on the base. And this miniature came with a two-sided stat card with stats for the D&D miniature skirmish game on one side, where you can also see the sketch used to sculpt the miniature. And on the back is the RPG stats copied directly out of the 3.5 Eberron campaign setting book, where it is a CR3 monster. Karrnathi Undead are still used to this day by the Karns, despite Caius III recently cutting official ties with the Blood of Vol. Fort Bones and Fort Zombie are primarily manned by undead warriors of those types, with many of the ranks filled with both the standard and Karrnathi Undead variants. Fort Zombie is now tasked with preventing incursions from the Mournland, and Fort Bones is ready for crossings from the plains, which are usually just nomadic halflings and roaming dinosaurs, but sometime raiding warbands come in all the way from Valinor and cross the plains looking to rile things up. The last of the Karrnathi Undead minis is another zombie, this one from WizKids, in the Icons of the Realm set, Eberron Rising from the Last War, a common like the skeleton from the same set, but this one doesn't have a variant. This miniature more closely matches the art from Andrew Jones in Sculpt, but the desiccated skin is lighter in color than the way they painted it. The 4th edition stats had the zombie as an 11th level brute monster, and the general Karrnathi Undead Soldier stats in 5th edition D&D are CR3 creatures. Next, let's take a look at some of the people that helped create the Undead of Karrnath. The worshippers of the Blood of Vol. The origins of the Blood of Vol go back millennia to Erenal and the line of Vol. The elves of Erenal in the line of Vol and many other lines had a disagreement on the use of necromancy to preserve their ancestors. The line of Vol used negative energy sourced from Mabar instead of positive energy from Irian. The disagreement ended with the entire line of Vol being wiped out and remaining non-blood members and supporters being exiled to Corvair. They mostly ended up in the northeast in Karrnath and the Lazar Principalities. Though it is called Blood of Vol Cultist, this miniature actually depicts a pretty typical cleric of the Blood of Vol. There is no piece of art specifically that inspired it, but the deep red robes and the skull and the belt is a nice touch. It's a common figure from the D&D miniature skirmish game set Blood War, released November 2006, which is named after the demon/devil conflict in the D&D main cosmologies. Nothing to do with the Blood of Vol directly. The concept art was done by William O'Connor, which you can see on the stat card, which has the 3.5 RPG stats, which it's styled as a 4th level warrior with an aberrant dragon mark, as well as the D&D skirmish game stats on the back. The stat block from the card was inspired by or reused in the April 2007 adventure Eyes of the Lich Queen. In Northeast Corvair, the beliefs of the elven refugees regarding necromancy mixed with the local populace of disillusioned humans, who were mostly followers of the sovereign host. These beliefs culminated with deciding that life is fundamentally about the struggle of life against death, and the gods were either not real or so uncaring about sentient life that they allowed people to die and then stop existing after they died. So these people believed they needed to look to the power of one's own blood, the divinity within. At the culmination of this power within, they would be able to become everlasting and immortal. This Blood of Vol Fanatic miniature leads more towards the evil cult of necromancers side of the Blood of Vol, which are more likely members of smaller fanatical subsects like the Order of the Emerald Claw, and despite that, being evil is not actually all that common among the Seekers. This miniature was in the Unhallowed set of the D&D Miniatures skirmish game, released in March 2007 as a common. Clearly inspired by the full cover spread from 2006's Faiths of Eberron by Wayne Reynolds. It did have its miniature modeled specifically after concept art, based on this by Ron Spencer. The stats in 3.5 say this Fanatic is a 6th level barbarian who uses special features from the player's handbook 2, plus a feat from Faiths of Eberron. The stat block also appeared in the adventure Eyes of the Lich Queen. Seekers believe that the divinity within is rooted in the power of their blood, and communities of Seekers of the divinity within do offer small, regular sacrifices of their blood to their martyred champions. Champions of the Blood of Vol are those who retain their spirit, but have lost their ability to gain true immortality by becoming undead. So vampires, mummies, and other corporeal, intelligent undead. These champions often join their mortal priestly counterparts in the leadership of the religion, which does have temples, clerics, monks, and similar trappings, and does operate in public view. One of those monks is this miniature. The Blood of Vol Divinity Seeker from the D&D Miniatures game set, Unhallowed. It was an uncommon, and it's based on this art from the Eyes of the Lich Queen adventure by Ron Lehman. Based on the weapon, I would venture, though I don't have any direct evidence, that this order of monks has adapted techniques originated by the Flayed Hand, monks of the Dark Six god, the Mockery, who often uses chain weapons also. The stat card is for a 7th level monk using a chain and dagger weapon from the Arms and Equipment Guide, and has the miniature game stats on the back. The concept art for the miniature itself was done by Steve Prescott. Like the other Blood of Vol minis we've seen, the stats originated in the Eyes of the Lich Queen adventure. While the Bone Knight looks like an undead creature without flesh in many ways, they are still living, breathing champions of Karrnath and the Blood of Vol. They are usually paladins of the Blood of Vol, and also a member of one of the knightly orders of Karrnath, like the Order of the Emerald Claw or Order of the Ebon Skull, sometimes called the Onyx Skull, who embrace their role in commanding undead and wear special bonecraft armor. Many still serve as leaders of Karrnathi forces, even after the Emerald Claw were made outlaws and the Order of the Ebon Skull disbanded. The Bone Knight originally appeared in 3.5 edition as a prestige class in the Karrnath chapter of the July 2005 book, 5 Nations, and returned in 5th edition as a CR5 enemy stat block. There are also a number of unofficial DM's Guild playable classes available as subclasses for either the fighter or paladin. This miniature follows the official Tom Giarello art from both 5 Nations and Eberron Rising from the Last War, and matches very closely with the arm holding the sword just being mirrored and more color put into the cape as the only minor changes. This miniature was a rare in WizKids Icons of the Realm set, Eberron Rising from the Last War, denoted by the High Collector number. So who are these Order of the Emerald Claw folks I mentioned earlier? They're a fanatical knightly order of the Blood of Vol, one of the many orders within Karrnath, though the knights took an especially Karrnathi nationalist bent. Secretly, they were formed by the Lady of Ilmarrow Castle, and renamed after a green dragon of great import to the history of the line of Vol. Near the end of the last war, King Caius III pulled away governmental support of the Blood of Vol, band-specific related orders, like the Order of the Ebon Skull and Order of the Emerald Claw. Most of them followed the king's orders to help secure the peace, but the Claw did not. Indeed, now they act as terrorists, recruiting Karns by appealing to Karrnathi supremacists and restarting the last war, and working, of course, for Lady Ilmarrow's mysterious goals. The miniature is not based on any specific piece of art, but the visual is a common theme in a number of pieces of Eberron art. It's got the Order's claw symbol prominently on the shield, and one of their most commonly depicted weapons, a flail. The concept art was done by Steve Prescott. This was a common in the 2004 Wizards of the Coast set, Aberrations. I'd recommend tracking a number of these down for anyone running an Eberron game, as the claw makes great cannon fodder that your players don't need a lot of thought if defeating them is a good idea. They're basically Nazi terrorists. The stats used on the stat card are from the July 2004 adventure, Shadows of the Last War. Before we start talking about the next miniatures, I want to warn any Eberron players that there are potential spoilers here. If you are playing in a campaign centered around Karrnath, the Blood of Vol, or the Order of the Emerald Claw, I would recommend skipping ahead to the timecode on screen to make sure you avoid learning about these next two miniatures. Though DMs running those types of campaigns might want to track one or both of these down specifically. Okay, now that the spoiler warning is through, let's talk about Lady Ilmarrow, or as she is more properly known, Lady Arandis Vol, sometimes with the de Vol honorific attached as she is dragon marked, though she was born and died before any of those conventions began. There are a few things we should start out with before we go into her backstory. Lady Vol is many things. She's half elven, half green dragon, and she's a scion of the line of Vol bearing the mark of death. And she's a lich. This is the first of two versions of Lady Vol that exist. It's from the July 2007 Wizards of the Coast D&D Miniatures game set, Night Below, where it was a rare, denoted by the star symbol. Lady Vol's miniature concept art is by Jim Nelson, as you can see it from its miniature stat card, and how it diverges from the only previous depiction of her on the cover of 2006's Fates of Eberron. Further depictions in 4th edition and in the Dungeons & Dragons online video game hew closer to Wayne Reynolds' original cover art. The Eberron campaign setting doesn't have full stats, but says Lady Vol is a Lich Elf half-dragon with 16 levels of Wizard. The stat card has her instead as a Lich Elf half-dragon with 16 levels of Sorcerer, with spells from non-core books like Magic of Eberron and the Spell Compendium. As for her backstory, the elves of the line of Vol practice necromancy using the power of Mabar, the plane of shadow and negative energy, since the days elves were slaves to the giants of Zendrik. They were one of the first mortals to develop a dragon mark, piquing the interest of the dragons of Arganesson, who generally felt antipathy to the elves. Minara, matriarch of the House of Vol, and an ancient green dragon known only as the Emerald Claw, began a genetic experiment to empower the Mark of Death. Arandis was the result. Before she ascended to full power over life and death, the full might of the dragons of Arganesson and the elves of the Undying Court fell upon House Vol. Minara put her daughter through the rituals to become a lich, as a last-ditch effort to save her from the purge by the dragons and the elves. As you can see, the 5th edition design for Lady Vol changed a bit from both the 3rd and 4th edition versions. The art is done by Lake Hurwitz and was in the Eberron Rising from the Last War book. This miniature is from WizKids' Eberron Rising from the Last War set in the Icons of the Realms line, where it is a rare. In 4th edition, Lady Vol is a level 11 controller leader, and in 5th edition, she is a CR22 monster. Now that we're moving into the home stretch, let's talk about the elves themselves. With their long lives, elves' minds are slow to accept change. and are willing to spend decades or centuries perfecting skills. With this mindset, they have a difficult time letting go of those that they lose, and have ways of preserving their dead they have been practicing for millennia. The islands of Eberron are special, with higher than normal number of manifest zones to the planes of negative and positive energies. The line of Vol adapted ancient Calbaran techniques learned in Zendrick, channeling the dark negative energy of Mabar. The Jalian and a number of other lines channeled positive radiant energy from Irian and made the Undying, a special form of Undead that preserves an elf forever in both body and mind, without corrupting them and turning them evil like nearly every classical necromantic technique. The Undying Soldier on screen was a great elven soldier, preserved to protect the other members of the Undying Court. This miniature is from the appropriately named D&D miniatures game set Death Knell from the year 2005 in March, where it was an uncommon. The mini matches up quite well with the art used in the core Eberron 3.5 book, as well as being reused in 5th edition, done by James Zhang. However, the colors are darkened a lot, and the height of the miniature is a little small compared to even elves in the same product line. The concept art made specifically for the miniature was done by Steve Prescott, as you can see on the stat card, which also has it showing the CR2 stats from the Eberron campaign setting, with the miniature game stats on the other side. The 4th edition books never actually statted out the Undying at all, though. There is a promotional version of the miniature with a different color scheme, blue, white, and bronze, which was given out in the D&D Player Rewards program in April of 2005. This program gave rewards out for RPGA and in-store play. It came with the identical stat card to the Death Knell version of the miniature. Unlike the majority of other religions in Eberron, the Undying Court has a physical representation on the material plane. But the Elves of Eberron don't worship individual ancestors that have been preserved. Instead, they feel devotion towards the whole Undying Court, its soldiers, mages, counselors, and teachers, and more that are preserved bodily or as spirit idols, together as a whole gestalt that are empowered. In fact, the Undying won't last long without a large enough population of elves nearby that believe, meaning the bulk of the Undying are restricted to Shea Mordai in Eberron to stay near the populace of devotees, with a few able to last in Sharn's Areni embassy, as the population there is just large enough. Eberron Rising from the Last War brought back stats for the Undying, and an Undying Soldier miniature followed in the WizKids Icons of the Realm set of the same name. This common in the set is almost direct representation of the James Zhang art, with just a slight repositioning of the spear and repose. And it's actually a reasonable height for an elf. The Undying Soldier in 5th edition has a CR2 stat block. Eberron elves of status within a noble house can invoke the right of counsel from their own personal ancestors, and others may earn that right through works aiding the court. Those with full rights may do this as often as they wish, but many elves of Eberron get to query their ancestors at least once in their lifetime. The right of counsel was represented by a feat in the Eberron campaign setting book, and was a plot point in the Stormdragon novels by James Wyatt. The city of the dead, Shea Mordai, cannot legally be entered by the living, except for by priests of the transition, without the right of counsel, or special dispensation by the priests, or by the sibling kings of Eberron. Those that would be providing the counsel are usually the Undying Councilors. This miniature is a rare from Eberron Rising from the Last War from WizKids. It's based on the art for the Councilor in the Eberron campaign setting book of 3.5, as this art was not included in the 5th edition books. It's a near one-to-one representative of the James Zhang art. In the Eberron campaign setting book, they are CR9, and in 5th edition's Eberron Rising from the Last War, they are CR10. They did not get a stat block in 4th edition. So that's all the Eberron-related Undead, Undying, and their friends, available as official miniatures. No official options for any Aeronal elves exist, unfortunately, though I have personally painted some elf minis to look like they have some fashionable death masks or tattoos. Thanks for watching until the end of the video. I hope to keep digging into the many items available in the world of Eberron. If you can help me locate some of the harder to locate items for miniatures, some of the promo items, especially some of the Warforged and Iron Defender, are hard to find at a good price, as well as some of the RPGA adventures, please contact me at the email address on screen.